our children to grow up together. So I have an 8-year-old,
I have a 7.5-year-old,
and I have a 6 and also a 2-year-old.
and I have a 2-year-old also. So the 2-year-old are boys, and they're 6 or 7 months apart from each other.
Okay, awesome. Wow. And then what did you guys do before you became like financially independent and started your family?
We both worked in investment banking and then moved over from investment banking to consulting and financial services. So we worked for the big financial services companies like Accenture, and I worked in different banks. Goldman Sachs, I did 7.5 years there. And then during my consulting career, I worked in almost all banks around the world too.
Wow.
Yeah, we both finance Wall Street executives and just busy people working too hard.
Yeah, we knew that we couldn't maintain those schedules because we said, we were mature moms. We had our first kids around like 35. And we said, you know what? The hours we're working and the stress, that's not conducive for building a family, because we wanted to say, look, we want to have children. We didn't want to have to do it. Yep.
Where did you guys get the idea about financial independence?
I think from growing up and seeing our mother work so hard. Our mother worked 7 days a week, and she died when we were 20.
Yeah, just before our senior year in college.
So we knew money had always played a big factor in our life. And when we said, my mother actually has 6 children, and we told ourselves when we had children, we wanted to be there more for them, and that money couldn't be an issue at the time.
Exactly. Right. We didn't want our families to have to experience what we grew up dealing with, because money won't be a factor for them. So we made it a point to be financially independent before we had children.
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, so tell us a little bit about like whichever one of you guys wants to go first, about like how you decided like it was time to start a family, and then what happened after you decided it was time to start a family.
Well, this is Nadia. I'll start first. So I was working on a very stressful project, and I had got married a year before, and my husband and I, we wanted to plan our pregnancy. And I just remember getting real emotional on this project one day. And I had my customer who was there, she was very much pregnant, hormone city. So at one point our hormones went crazy, and I said, something's going on. I'm not even able to go eat because I'm in so many meetings. I took a pregnancy test and I said, oh man, I'm pregnant. And it happened like first or second try, it was like, oh, you're pregnant. Wow. So I said, you know what? I can't do the stress anymore. I can't do all of this because I want to make sure that I can't even get up and eat at this point, Something has to change. So I decided at that point, okay, I'm going to take a leave of absence for work, make sure I have everything in order before I decide to really retire from working.
Yeah.
At that point, I went through some prenatal screenings and stuff, and it showed up that my child may have spinal bifida. So what we decided was, okay, we had to decide as a couple, are we going to keep the child? So my husband and I agreed that we would keep the child, but they also said that test might pick up a small percentage that your placenta might break down. So it was like the test scans like, okay, your child probably has spinal bifida, or it could be a small chance of your placenta will break down.
How many weeks pregnant were you when you had this test?
I want to say I was probably in my second month. Yeah, my second month or third month.
Okay.
And it was very early. So I said, you know what, I'm going to be positive. I'm going to go on the side that my placenta might break down earlier. So they did more extensive tests. And when we started doing sonograms and stuff, they started seeing like it was nothing with spinal bifida. More likely my placenta would start breaking down later in the pregnancy.
Okay.
So I remember one day sitting in my car and I saw spots. And I said, okay, I never thought anything about it. I was like, oh, spots, that's weird. And then I had signed up for emails for Baby Center. And this happened like a week after. They sent the email like, hey, if you see spots, call your doctor. So I said, okay, let me call my doctor and tell her I saw spots last week. She's like, come in, let me check your blood pressure. My blood pressure was elevated at the time. I said, okay. So she started monitoring my blood pressure. There was no protein in my urine. And that's something they checked because those are signs of preeclampsia at that point.
Right.
And I don't have high blood pressure problems. So it's just something that was showing up when I was pregnant. So she said, just keep an eye out. Make sure that if you see spots again, call me. So the next time I saw spots was Christmas Eve. And I'm sitting down eating, and then I saw spots. I'm like, I was like, I don't want to go call. Doctor's not on call. They said, you have to go into the hospital. they'll check you out at the hospital. I go to the
Mm.
hospital, they said, your blood pressure is kind of high. I think we're going to keep you for a little bit. So they kept me for a week. And I
Wow.
said, I think, no, they kept me for 2 days. And they said, okay, you can go home. We don't see anything, no protein.
What was your due date?
My due date was March 17th.
Okay, so we're at Christmas Eve or so, and you're supposed to go a few more months before you're actually
Exactly. So this was
supposed to
like,
go a
I
few more
guess, in
months.
the
Okay.
20-something week area.
Okay.
So I go there, we go back home, and then I had to go buy a blood pressure monitor for my home use.
Like your blood pressure
Had
at
to start
home.
checking my blood pressure more regularly. Then
Mhm.
I started seeing swelling in my face, and as my fingers
Mm.
started swelling up, I had to remove my rings and stuff. So I was
Okay.
like, okay, now it's probably pretty clear that I have preeclampsia, but the protein is not showing up. So that's another signal. So they said,
Mm.
at this point, I want you to start seeing a high blood pressure specialist too, because my
Oh.
doctor wasn't a high risk doctor.
Okay.
But because I was 34, 35 at the time, they said, we want you to see a high risk blood pressure specialist. I get to the high risk blood pressure specialist. She checks, like just does a normal check, wants to see how my heart is pumping. And she
Mhm.
goes, you have a heart murmur. I go, no, I don't. She's like, I think so. So she calls her colleague in. He listens. And these are like the top high blood pressure specialists in the country.
Mm.
And they said, yeah, it sounds like you have a heart murmur. We're going to schedule for a sonogram on your heart. Okay. So now at this point, I'm like, 7 months pregnant.
Wow.
They send me to another area of the hospital to get the sonogram on my heart. Turns out, clear as day, I have something that's called a bicuspid aortic valve. So just to simplify it, you have something in your heart that's supposed to look like a Mercedes-Benz sign. So it's points, right? Like a peace sign or Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah.
Mine has 2 flaps instead of 3. So what happens is that the blood spurts out sporadically. So there's no way of it like having a consistent. So what it does, it causes stress on your aortic valve. So if you hear of like high school players or professional sports players dying while they're playing, most likely that's the cause because it can go undetected. The reason why they were able to detect it is because I had double the blood flow because I was pregnant. They never picked it up before.
So I like to say that her daughter, which was her first birth, actually, saved her life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You did.
So what was happening at that point was that after that, my blood pressure had started skyrocketing again. So they said, look, we're going to keep you in the hospital. So at that point, I had to stay at least a month in the hospital.
And how pregnant were you at this point?
I was probably still like 28 weeks at that point. And they would do tests every day. So one of the things they do is test, I guess, what is that called? NST? It's something they're checking to see what the baby's heart rate is doing.
Okay.
And they check the amount of amniotic fluid you have.
Okay.
So I remember sitting there and waiting. And they were like, did your water break? I said, no, I would think I would know when my water broke. And they were like, I said, I'm pretty early and no. I'm like, I think maybe your water broke. I'm like, no, it didn't. Turns out my placenta was breaking down. I wasn't producing enough amniotic fluid. So it had dropped to a very dangerous level.
Oh, okay.
I was 34 weeks.
Wow.
So they gave me a steroid shot that you have to get 2 doses within a 24-hour period to make sure that the baby's lungs were developed. So they did this just before I hit 34 weeks.
Okay.
That was significant because that later that night, my doctor came in and said, oh, you're going to have a baby tonight. I go, what? They're like, yeah, we're going to induce you. I said, but I just ate dinner. They're like, okay, we're coming back in 8 hours. We're inducing you. You're having a baby tonight.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So I was like, okay. So I called my husband, like, you have to come to the hospital. Like, they're inducing me tonight. So 2:00 in the morning, they set me up for an emergency C-section. It took 5 takes for the epidural because the anesthesiologist that was there was, I guess, relatively new, and he messed up 3 times, which is very traumatic when you're first baby and they're messing up the epidural.
Yeah.
Our senior anesthesiologist do it. So gave birth to my daughter. And then she had to be in the NICU for 2 weeks after that. But while she was in the NICU, I made it a point to try to breastfeed her so she can get out of that NICU as soon as possible. The only thing that was with her was that she was very low birth weight. She was 3 pounds, 14 ounces.
So did you like have like any sort of reservations about like having the emergency C-section? Were you like scared or
Oh,
nervous?
I was scared. I was crying in the pre-op room, and I was crying. But I said,
Yeah.
you know what? This is what I have to do. Then and it's like, okay, this is your first point of being a mom. You have to do what's right for the baby at this point. So I had
Yeah.
already stayed in the hospital for so long. I said, okay, this is what you have to do. And I did the emergency C-section, and then stayed in the hospital with her as long as I could, and started breastfeeding her because I said, this is how I'm going to get her weight up as soon as possible. And
Yeah.
it took me 3 months to get her to latch. So I was pumping for 3 months before I can get her to latch because she was so small.
Did you have certified like lactation consultants at the hospital, or did you take breastfeeding classes or anything?
Well, I did not, but well, they
Okay.
give you a lady who comes through in the hospital, and she works with you
Mhm.
for like a day or two, but it's still very difficult. But
Yeah.
Nicole had happened to have her daughter a year before, and Nicole was a breastfeeding consultant at a WIC office because she started volunteering there.
Oh, nice. Okay.
So I'll let Nicole tell her birth story. But my daughter is like super tall now, seven and
She's
a
taller
half.
than my kids.
She's taller than all. So smart. So I don't want people to think like 34 weeks is premature, but you can turn it around.
Yeah. So she stayed 43 days in the hospital, like after she was born in the NICU, right?
My daughter stayed 2 weeks in the hospital.
Okay, 2 weeks. Okay. Okay. And were you able to visit her like every single day in the NICU? And like, what did your support look like while your daughter was in the NICU?
My husband had just started a new job. So he would
Okay.
drive into the city. We lived in Queens at the time. He would drive me into the city 7 a.m. We park a car. I would go to the hospital. He would take the train to work. And I would stay there until he got off of work and he'll pick me up. So I say 12 hours a day at the hospital, my daughter, holding her,
Wow.
doing skin to skin and trying to breastfeed her the whole time.
Yeah. And what was your like mental health like? Like, were you able to really process all the things that had just happened to you during a pregnancy, which you found out you were going to have a spina bifida baby? Then that wasn't true. And
Yeah.
your placenta was like basically, did
It
you,
broke down. Yep.
right? Then you had a premature baby. Then your baby went to the NICU and you had an emergency C-section. Like, did you get a chance to really process like any of that? That's a lot of change.
And they found out I had a heart condition. So
Right. And not to mention the heart condition. Yeah.
So I didn't process it at the time. The only time I processed it when they said, okay, your stay at the hospital is done, like the 5 days after giving birth. I
Okay.
went home and I couldn't stop crying when I got home. It just
Yeah.
all washed over me, and I was just really emotional. I couldn't stop crying at all. And I
Mm,
think that's when everything hit me. And then after that, I said, you know what? The baby, that's the most important thing right now. I have to push that aside and let me deal with the baby.
yeah. How long did you breastfeed?
20 months.
Wow. Okay. And then everything went developmentally okay with the baby after.
Oh yeah, she's completely fine. The
Okay.
doctors, they were all surprised because she was so small. Now
Yeah.
she's taller than average. She's like in gifted schools. She's doing great.
That's awesome. Okay. Wow. That's quite an incredible birth story. Okay. So Nadia, thank you so much for sharing your birth story. And you want Nicole to go
Yeah,
next?
talking go. She had to pick which one of her birth stories.
Well,
Yeah. So Nicole has beautiful babies. Nicole has 3. Nadia has 2.
Mhm. Now, I think your question, your first question was like, how did the planning go or so?
Yeah, like how did you find out you were pregnant, and like was it something that you and your spouse were like planning or like ahead of time, or was it like, oh, we're pregnant, kind of like it was for Nadia?
So my husband and I are planners. I would say he's
Okay.
much more of a planner than I am.
Yeah.
So with that, and also my advanced age, I think I got married at 32. So we tried having a baby starting at the age of 33. And,
Okay.
trying it the regular way, it just wasn't working. And then people saying, well, you're too stressed out. And I remember one night
Mm.
drinking a whole bunch of wine, and then I ended up just being sick instead of being.
Yeah.
But we decided a more planned approach, and I actually got
Okay.
a machine that would tell you your body temp and also when you were, ovulating.
Okay.
So I wanted to have children, so I decided to start using the machine to tell me when I was ovulating. And it took
Okay.
about a month or so, but it did work, and we found out we were pregnant.
Wow.
So
Okay.
I wasn't as lucky to do one or two and boom, it worked. But we did plan and it actually worked out for us. So it
Okay.
definitely, the first one was not a surprise.
Were you in stress though? Were you in the same situation as Nadia where like your high corporate job was sort of stressful at the time as well?
Actually, I had left maybe about 3 months before I found out I was pregnant. And I
Oh, so
actually
you left your corporate job.
I did. I actually was
Okay.
becoming an entrepreneur. I had started a company.
Okay.
And actually, the first day that I had my first customer is the first day I started throwing up and said, okay, this is interesting. So I don't think
Okay.
my husband and I were planning on
The morning sickness.
the morning sick. I had no idea what it meant to be pregnant, you know?
Yeah.
So I was just starting a next chapter in my life. I'm like, okay, we're married. I'm starting my new company. And oh, wow, I'm pregnant. Whoa, what is this? I was having morning
Yeah.
sickness and I was in very, very tired. And it took a
Mm.
toll on my business and it took a toll on my marriage too, because we
Yeah.
both didn't realize, it wasn't something we were expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it ended up that I did continue to do the business,
Okay.
but when I had my baby, my first child, I didn't know I was going to breastfeed. I didn't know I was going to be a stay-at-home mom either. I was more focused on the pregnancy rather than
What the
when it
after?
meant to be a mother.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until they handed me the baby and said, "Mom, do you want to feed the baby right now?" that I said, "Well, what do you mean feed the baby? Where's the bottle?" They're like, "No, try to breastfeed her." I was like, "Whoa, I never even thought about should I breastfeed this baby or not?" you know.
Mm.
So, and then they had actually induced my labor. So I was in labor for 2 days before I had my daughter. And then right
Oh.
after they gave me her, they told me to breastfeed. Then I was able to go into the room and get some sleep. But 2 hours later, they came in with the baby again.
Yeah, I don't think people realize they bring that baby in all the time.
And that was when I
Yeah.
realized that they said, we're going to bring the baby in every 2 hours for you to breastfeed. And I just
Yeah.
felt my whole life just turn upside down and everything
Mhm.
because no one told me about what it meant to, even if you don't breastfeed, you still have to feed the baby every 3 hours or so when you give
Yeah.
them formula. And I think that's something no one ever spoke about.
Yeah.
That was a
Let's
big.
back up a little bit. Let's talk about your pregnancy. Throughout
Mhm.
pregnancy, at the beginning, you had morning sickness, but like, what did the rest of the pregnancy look like? Did you feel supported by like your healthcare team? Were there any medical issues that came up with you or the baby?
Well, it's interesting because since I have 3 children, the first two were actually with the same OBGYN, you know,
Okay.
and my first pregnancy was
Smooth.
it was a smooth pregnancy up until the
Okay.
very end. At 38 weeks, I started developing high blood pressure and they induced me at 38 weeks. But with that pregnancy, I had no issues with my doctor, no issues with the pregnancy, the healthcare team, everything was fine.
Oh, okay. That's good.
But my second daughter, um, I used the same doctor and I ended up, they told me around 14 weeks that I had placenta previa, which means that my
Mm.
placenta was growing over my cervix.
Okay.
So my doctor had told me around 25 weeks, you might start bleeding. And she said, you have to be aware of that. Never told me anything more about what that meant. You
Oh,
know, that's when I started researching online that placenta previa was a very serious condition that could, you know, um,
You rupture.
I could rupture and I could lose my life and also the baby.
right.
But my doctor never communicated that to me. I'm not sure if she didn't want to scare me or she
Mm.
just, I realized that that doctor wasn't very
She's not very
emotionally
nice.
attached. This was the doctor that I used because I was like, okay, she's quick, fast, everything's great. But when it
Right.
came time where I needed some emotional support, she was not the right doctor. And it really showed up with my second daughter when I had placenta previa. I did start bleeding and I was rushed to the hospital. I ended up spending 43 days in the hospital.
Yep.
And the healthcare team that I had was all the members in her practice, which was 7 women. And out of the 7 women, my doctor was the only one that wanted to kick me out the hospital. All the other doctors in the practice said, listen, it's wintertime. We want you to stay here. No one's kicking you out. But my doctor, who I didn't have emotional connection with, was the only one that said, your insurance says if you don't bleed within this certain amount of time, you have to leave the hospital.
And she's the most junior in the practice, I
I
believe.
believe so. So that right there made me question who I had as a healthcare provider.
And you have been going to her for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with that, she asked me to leave the night before she went on vacation. I had seen a little post on Facebook with the Serenity Prayer. I had never seen the Serenity Prayer on Facebook at all or anything. I took it as a sign. And it said, the Serenity Prayer says, try to change the things that you can, and the things you can't, you have to accept. Now, I'm more of a spiritual person rather than religious person, I would say, but I felt
Yeah.
that there's something there that said, pay attention to this. So the
Yeah.
little voice told me, pay attention. That next morning when she called and said, we would like to release you from the hospital, you have to sign some papers, I told her no. That night, I ended up bleeding so much that they had to rush me.
At 2 o'clock in the morning.
3 o'clock in the morning, they rushed me into the delivery room for emergency delivery. My husband
Wow.
wasn't there. No one was there. Even my doctor wasn't there. I had to be delivered by another doctor, signing papers real quick to say, we have to do what we can to save you and the baby.
Wow.
So that's when I started thinking with my third child, I need to make sure the next person would not be this OBGYN. And the next OBGYN I would have to have emotional connection with me and understand my fears.
Yeah. So you ended up picking another doctor after.
I did.
Yeah. Yeah. Rightfully so. Did you pick somebody else in the practice? Because you guys said it was 7 doctors in that practice. Unlike it's a rotation where you who's ever on call sort of thing when you go into labor.
No, I actually did not pick another doctor within that practice.
Okay.
I had moved and I had decided to pick a doctor that was more convenient in Long Island, but then I started using references. And I actually used references from moms that I had met through my first 2 children. And I made sure to get the references of the moms I felt were the most vocal and the ones that would not accept less of a doctor.
Okay.
So the doctor I found was very good. She was very busy, but the first thing she did was took me into her office and say, tell me about your experiences, tell me your concerns, tell me how I can help you go through this pregnancy. And it was such a difference. And I couldn't believe it.
Wow. Okay. So
references really help.
Yeah, absolutely. So you found a new doctor from like local moms who you felt like were really vocal and would advocate for themselves. You wanted to know who their healthcare provider was. And you on that. Okay. Okay, awesome. So then how did that affect you going into your third pregnancy, right? Because now we're at baby 3 where you're interviewing new people and you want to know, okay, how can you help me? You want to develop a better relationship. And then what happened after that?
So I got pregnant with my third child and everything was going fine. And her practice was also a rotating practice. So I had to meet every doctor there. And in her office, there were actually 2 male doctors. And it was and it was the first time I actually had a male gynecologist. So that freaked me out. But I said, okay.
Some women love men.
Some women, prefer men doctors. Some women don't.
Right.
I'm one of those that don't, but I was like, listen, he's a doctor, fine, And the first one I met actually cracked a joke and said, you're my first male doctor. He's like, good, you're my first female patient. So he was breaking it up.
Love it.
Yeah, but so everybody in the practice was fine except for one doctor that I met. And I was glad that they made me meet every doctor. The first practice I went to, I didn't meet every doctor until I went to the hospital. This practice, they made sure I met every doctor before I went to the hospital. And that was a great thing because the other male doctor that I met, he was very callous, I felt. He was very dismissive. And he was the one that delivered the news that my son might have kidney problems because it was turned out that my the umbilical cord normally has 2 veins and 1 aortic valve that connects the umbilical cord. My son was missing a vein, that connection between me and him. So with that, there were going to be, it could possibly be developmental issues, heart issues, kidney issues, a whole host of things that can happen.
Wow.
And he's like, your kid might have kidney issues. Don't worry about it. And he really said it just like that. And I couldn't understand how he could be so dismissive. He just said the term to me and he just left the room.
Wow.
And I said, is this a big deal? I don't know. And I did more research and it turned out to be a very big deal. I had to speak to a genetic doctor about it. I had to take a heart sonogram for my son while he was still in my stomach.
In utero, yeah. Wow. Yeah.
And it was just so happened because I was advanced age, I had taken a lot of tests to see if the baby was growing, you know, at the right stages. So they said,
Okay.
based on what we're seeing, we don't think your son is going to have, the serious problems. But
Mm.
I knew from meeting that doctor, and because of those situations, they knew that I would have to go and deliver and schedule a delivery.
Yeah.
I knew from that experience with that doctor, I would not want him to be the one delivering my son.
Yeah. Needless to say,
Yeah.
that definitely was not the delivery that you want to get from a healthcare provider about any news. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But she knew that
He
he
was the
wasn't
one
going
that you were like, we absolutely cannot deliver with him. Everyone else in the practice, though, pretty much lined up with what you felt at the beginning.
Yeah, and pretty much lined up with that. And there were also the women in the practice. I wanted to do a VBAC, that's vaginal birth after C-section, because I had the emergency C-section with my second daughter,
Right.
and I had gone vaginally with my first daughter. There was an option for me to try VBAC.
Okay, that's good.
And this was an office that was actually, supportive of that.
Okay.
So the office overall was great, but this doctor was also not supportive of a VBAC. And he said, if you use him, he would not give you a VBAC. But the other women that were in the practice, they actually made it a point to say, if you can do VBAC, let's try it.
Okay.
And I actually ended up being able to VBAC.
Oh, nice. Okay. So you did get the VBAC that you wanted. Did you have any other things that popped up that were health issues for you or health issues for baby number 3 after that original testing?
After that original testing, it turned out that his heart was fine, but he did have some hydronephrosis, which is a small kidney problem, which is kidneys were swelling up with water.
Okay.
Now, it could cause renal problems, but it was just something I had to monitor.
Okay.
And I found out after I gave birth to him, they do newborn screenings. These are tests that they do for every child that you have, and you don't know. It's done for every child that's in the hospital.
Okay.
And through the newborn screening, I found that my son was hypothyroid.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that was also a surprise for me.
That was a surprise. Yeah, I was going to say, how did you and your husband like deal with the news and with navigating what was seeming like a kind of healthcare provider who from the first 2 pregnancies that you didn't want to deal with? What were the conversations like that you guys were having, and how were you feeling?
Well, I mean, my husband and I was great because we were always on the same page when it comes to, the birth plan.
Yeah.
I knew I wasn't the mom that would give birth at home, but I had some idea that I thought that the deliveries would be one way, but none of them turned out. But
Yeah.
even when we changed, I made sure my husband was great at advocating for me.
You got to speak up for yourself when you're pregnant, because they will ignore you, and it's unfortunate, but you are your best advocate.
And especially being a woman,
for yourself.
especially being a woman of color. I had known the stats that women of color are most likely not to be treated the same way, and the consequences of that could be dire.
Yeah.
And I made sure even with my first child, I had my husband in a room, and he was questioning why they were inducing my pregnancy and why they wanted to do a C-section. And they gave me a drug called Cervidil to jumpstart the labor.
Yeah.
And with that, one of the doctors that I hadn't met, she checked my cervix and said, "Oh, your cervix is not open. You must have a tight pelvis. So we're going to give you a C-section." And since it had been there so long, because it takes 12 hours for this drug to work, my husband spent the time reading the brochure that they gave us. So please read the material that they give you at the hospital.
Yeah.
And he said that Cervidil can be taken twice because sometimes the first time it doesn't work. All he had to say was, I read that you can do this drug twice if it doesn't work the first time. The doctor said, okay, we'll do it again, and left me alone. And the next time she checked me, I was open enough to get, a vaginal delivery. So just because my husband was there reading the material, and I had my cousin there who was a nurse. She's a nurse.
No, she's
Okay.
No, she's a nurse practitioner actually
in gynecology.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I had her there to make sure, because I was nervous, and I had heard so many stories about, oh, they'll just give you a C-section, because in America, C-section is so common.
Yeah.
And she was there to help advocate too, but she was more there to make sure that they had the IV in correctly and that there was a
Yeah.
doctor somewhere to be around, because really these hospitals can be so packed that you can be forgotten. And she
Yeah.
was there to help make sure that people were coming, make sure that they were giving me something to drink or so, because they induced me so early. There was
Yeah.
2 days I had to be on clear diet, which meant I had to drink just soup, ice,
Yeah.
just clear soup, just soup
Liquid. Yep.
and jello, you know.
Yeah.
So she at least was advocating that way, while my husband was nerding out in the corner reading the brochures. And he advocated for me again when it came time for the second child, because he was telling the doctors, I don't care what insurance says, you know, help keep her at the hospital, because when you're in the hospital for that long and the doctor wants you out, you start feeling like, am I wrong for wanting to stay? But he was
Yeah.
there to help and say, no, you're not wrong. Let's try to do this. And he would question the doctor, and he said, I don't have to be your friend. So with the third one, he was pretty easy, but he was there to help, manage my emotions when it came
Yeah.
out to, we're getting some news here, but be positive.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so then tell us what happened with baby number 3. Where were you when you went into labor, and then what happened after your labor started?
So baby number 3, it was a planned delivery,
Okay.
and I needed someone to actually watch my other 2 children, because
Right.
they wanted for me to go in at 3 a.m. in the morning.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I had to have someone watch my 2 children. This was the first one I was able to pack a bag for
Okay.
to the hospital. So that was new.
Yeah.
I got there, and Long Island was totally different from Manhattan. And there was another reason why I picked the hospital in Long Island, because every mom was able to get a private delivery room and a private recovery room.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah. While in Manhattan, it was $900 a night if you wanted a private recovery room. So that was is definitely something to weigh if you're in a city, if you can do a suburban hospital versus a city hospital.
But look at the quality of the hospital.
You're looking at the quality of the hospital.
Yeah.
I also picked the
Great
hospital
tip.
that had similar quality too.
Okay.
Just to jump in, if you have the chance to schedule your C-section, schedule it to be the first in the morning. You don't want the team to, because you might have to wait for something might be complicated with the pregnancy in front of you. You might have to wait hours and you're not able to eat, and you might get some tired doctors. So if they're the first ones to be scheduled for the day, you're getting a fresh set of doctors coming in, and they're not rushing to be the first one. So
I love that tip.
I learned that with my second son, because my high-risk doctor said, I'm booking you for this. These are the reasons why. I'm like, I didn't think about that.
It's actually,
Love that.
You just reminded me some good things that happened. Going the third time around, I learned a lot of things too. One, you have to respect the nurses. The nurses are going to be the ones that are going to be with you the most.
Yes.
And it was actually the nursing team that helped me VBAC.
Oh.
They were more experienced than the doctor.
They were more experienced than the doctor. One nurse actually put her elbows into my stomach to help me push out the baby, while 3 nurses on each side. It was kind of crazy, but I was able to VBAC because they were so passionate and willing to help.
Wow.
And the lead nurse knew more than the person that was administering the epidural on me and the Pitocin, because I think it was just a resident that gave me Pitocin, and she didn't read my records correctly, that she gave me too much. And because I had high blood pressure at the same time, I ended up throwing up because she dropped my blood pressure so low. So
don't trust the residents as much as the doctors
and the nurses.
Right. Yeah, the nurses are definitely great, especially if you can get them to see your birth plan and they know what the plan is for sure. Nurses, great advocates to have on your team. Exactly.
And I think they're also the most important in terms of recovery too, while you're at the hospital.
Completely agree. Okay. So with the third, you guys scheduled, so you knew exactly when you were going to go into labor, and then you were able to get your VBAC. And then what happened like immediately after? So you were saying that breastfeeding before was something that like you had never thought about, but it was that kind of got pushed on you and you weren't exactly sure like how you were feeling about it. So that sort of like morph and grow like with baby number 3?
Oh, big time. So the first child, I didn't know, and they actually told me she was tongue-tied. And I'm not sure if this is
Oh,
something that's, very common, because I've met so many women that said, they told me my baby was tongue tied. They told me my baby was tongue tied.
yeah.
And they wanted to cut her frenulum.
Familium or something.
Okay. So they wanted to
The
cut
thing
the
that
little
holds your tongue down to your.
Right.
And I was hesitant to do that. And I said, well, how are you
Yeah.
going to tell me she's tongue-tied? I bet 90% of the people around are tongue-tied then. You wouldn't know unless they try to breastfeed. But I had such a
Yeah.
difficult time breastfeeding my daughter. And I had such a difficult time, turning into a mom, because it was identity shift / crisis I went through, I believe. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of women don't understand that when you have a baby, people will ask you, how's the baby? Oh, the baby's great. And then you're an afterthought. Oh, how are you doing? And I think that's when the emotions hit me with my first daughter.
Okay.
And I said, wow, I'm going through so much. And on top of it, I'm having such a difficult time breastfeeding baby. And I was doing a hybrid. I was doing formula plus breastfeeding.
Okay.
And I did that for the first 8 weeks until a friend of mine had called me, who had a baby that was in the NICU for a long time. And she had used a lactation consultant who was able to get her to latch her baby. She said, I was spending probably $125 a week on formula, because I was using the expensive formula where I just have to shake it and, give it to the baby. I didn't have to mix it or anything like that. And she said, if you go to this lactation consultant and spend $250, that'll be a lot less than what you're going to keep spending on formula. I went to the lactation consultant that day. I was breastfeeding my daughter that night, fully off of breastfeeding. But I had kept trying to pump, kept trying to breastfeed, and also do formula. But I was very, very adamant about trying to get the baby off of formula. And it was really interesting because I had no support. I was the first in my family to breastfeed. My husband's family, my mother-in-law wasn't supportive of it at all. But I pushed through, and I was able to, breastfeed my baby. And because of that experience that I had, I actually called up a local WIC office to see if I can help be a breastfeeding counselor to teach more women how to breastfeed.
Wow.
Yeah, and they said, okay, they let me volunteer, and I learned so much more. And I don't think many people understand that WIC has a breastfeeding program, and they
have a breastfeeding consultant there that you can see for free.
A certified lactation consultant that will help you breastfeed, check the baby weight. And it was just something that a lot of people don't use.
And you get more money.
I think you get more benefit.
Time. Yeah.
I wasn't on WIC, but they were able to say, we want you to come in and teach more people, because they needed more women of color to teach women of color how to breastfeed.
Yeah. And that's a fantastic story, because this month is actually National Breastfeeding Month. That's awesome. Yeah. And they do have a Black Breastfeeding Week. And
look at that.
Yeah, that's absolutely awesome.
My second daughter, totally opposite in terms of, I was able to latch her only on one breast, and she would not go to the second breast. I guess we're a little too specific here, but because of pregnancy, I guess one nipple was bigger than the other. And since she was small, I was only able to latch on one than the other. And I didn't keep forcing the issue. And I ended up breastfeeding her 21 months just on one side.
Wow.
Because I had produced so much milk this time around. I don't know what happened, but I produced so much milk. I breastfed her from just one side. But that was not a fun situation. She would not take a bottle, and she would only go to one side. So when it came to my third one, I knew two things. One, have this baby take breast milk in a bottle right away. Two, make sure he breastfeeds from both sides.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's still breastfeeding. He's
Overall, I think that you guys have like some fantastic birth stories with so many lessons like throughout each one. How do you guys feel about like your motherhood journey, and like what advice would you give to moms now?
I will say, one, if you start speaking up for yourself at the hospital, that speaking up will continue throughout, because you're going to have to speak up for yourself and your child. And when they start going to school, so get the practice now while you're going to,
Absolutely.
Ask questions if you don't understand, because if they can't explain it to you, they're the wrong person speaking to you.
Yeah.
Also, your identity will change. Like
Mm.
we were in our early 30s, mid 30s when we had children.
Yeah.
So it will change you even when you're younger too. Like you have to start thinking in different terms and not just yourself anymore. It's the kids now too, you know?
Yes.
It will change your life. And one of my things that if you're getting married or thinking about being married, I would try to hold off having a kid at least after the first year. There's a lot of stress, a lot of people are not sleeping, and people don't tell you that. And there's going to be a lot
Right.
of arguments.
Yeah.
So if you have a strong relationship at that point, you can try to weather through those first 1-2 years when that baby is there, so that you guys,
Yeah.
everybody feels like they have some kind of ownership into the relationship, you know?
Right. That's good. Really great tip. Nobody talks about the difference in the relationship between you and your partner after you have a baby. Yeah.
Yep.
I would say the things I've learned, one is that you have to be patient. You have to be
Yeah.
patient with yourself, you have to be patient with your partner, and you have to be patient with the baby.
Yeah.
There's no rule books when it comes to this,
No.
and not everyone has the same idea of what's supposed to be right versus wrong.
Yeah.
And like Nadia said, when it comes to your partner, I'm telling you, the amount of arguments and amount of, well, this is your baby too. How come you're not helping? It's because
Mm.
of the amount of lack of sleep and lack of understanding whose role is what and what's the
Yeah.
responsibility that one has.
Yeah.
Now, you can get that all mapped out. I remember my husband and I had said, okay, you're going to take the 5 o'clock feed. I'll do 7, this and that. Some people do it. Sometimes it does not work. I have
Yeah.
realized with my husband and talking to some other moms, the husband does not, or the father does not hear that baby crying as much as you do. That
Mm-hmm.
baby will wake you up with a drop of a dime.
Yeah.
And a lot of it falls on the mother, but it's only temporary. The baby
Mm.
grows more and more every day. So give yourself patience and just relax as much as you can.
Try to sleep.
No, the
Yeah.
trying to sleep doesn't work.
And I just want to make it a point, like we both breastfed our children pretty late on too. Like my son, I breastfed to probably 26 weeks,
Okay.
but 26 months. But my thing is, it's only important that the baby eats. If you can
Mm.
breastfeed, great. If you can't, there's no shame in formula feeding either. The main
Yeah.
thing is that you're feeding that baby. So don't feel like you're ashamed if you can't breastfeed. I always recommend breastfeeding,
Mm-hmm.
but I think
It's
it's
hard.
every mother. It's hard in the beginning,
Yeah.
but you
I
should
love
not
that
be.
tip.
Can't do it.
Yeah, I love that tip. And just so everybody remembers, give everybody another intro of each one of you as an individual, and then do your Wealth Twins intro as well, and tell people about like your business and how people can contact you guys online.
Okay. Well, I'm Nadia Busoy.
And I'm Nicole Ozelge.
We're the Wealth Twins, millionaire moms who teach others how to be financially independent. And you can find us at wealthtwins.com or our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/wealthtwins.
Yes, we make videos weekly and we teach about investing, money management, and how to earn more money. And we're doing this all from a place of knowing how difficult money can be on relationships, on
Mm-hmm.
family, and just in life in general.
Yeah.
So we're taking what we've learned from going from living in public housing to becoming millionaires and doing this on our own and teaching people that it can be done. And you can do this to help raise your family and stay home. In our case, we decided to change it up and change the cycle of working while having kids and actually staying home and work instead of staying home with our children.
Yeah.
We gave ourselves a choice, and we want to do
Yeah.
others.
Yeah, so we would love for you guys to check us out. Every week, we do this.
That is so awesome. I want to thank you, Nadia and Nicole, so much for being a part of the Your Birth Network podcast and just sharing your story and sharing like all about your pregnancies, the good, and also all of the challenges that you came across and how you were able to meet those challenges personally and also with your partner, which is very important. And thank you guys so much for the work you're doing in the financial space. Like it's so needed to see more women of color in the space saying that they are millionaires and that financially you can give yourself options for how you want to raise your children if you are financially independent. So I definitely appreciate that. I will link everything that Nadia and Nicole shared with us in the comments for sure, about like how you can find lactation counselors, how you can find a WIC program in your area, so that way you can get that information for free if that's something that you want. And then also how to find them online, their website and their YouTube channel as well. And thank you guys so much again. I really appreciate you both.
No, thank you very much.
Yes,
We
thank you
love
for
this.
having us.